In this lecture, we'll be exploring Lightroom's graduated filter tool. For this exercise, please load image WA005.jpg in the Develop module. Before we begin, let's discuss the goal of this exercise. Here, we have a landscape shot that includes a lake and mountains in the lower half and a skyline in the upper half of the shot. Say for example, we wanted to do any of the following. Decrease the exposure of the sky while increasing it for the lake and mountain areas. Change the color of the sky or the lake. Decrease the clarity of the lake for a slow shutter effect. We can accomplish these objectives and many more using Lightroom's graduated filter. Let's start with the first objective, which is decreasing the exposure value of the sky. First, select the graduated filter tool over here. Next, we'll need to instruct Lightroom on exactly which area we want to target, in this case the sky. But we need to be careful. We want to make sure that the graduated filter applies our exposure adjustment only to the sky and not to the lake or mountains. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by drawing the graduated filter, and it looks like this. Just 3 horizontal lines. Now we can move the entire filter up and down. Just so you know which way to position the graduated filter, go ahead and increase your exposure to something dramatic just so we know exactly what areas we're targeting. We know we want to apply an effect to the sky, and we don't want to apply any effect to the mountains. So we can see here that the graduated filter is impacting the right areas. I'll go ahead and expand this top line here. So what this does is it creates a gradient effect based on the adjustment here that you apply. So since our goal was to decrease the exposure value of the sky, I'm actually going to go the opposite way now that I have the right area targeted. So you can see that it's a very smooth transition from the new exposure value to the bottom half of the image, which we didn't want to affect. Okay, now I'm going to take a look at the before and after. I'm just going to toggle the on and off switch so we can preview what it was before, and this is after. Now just keep in mind that this entire graduated filter, these horizontal lines here, they can be rotated, they can be, if you put it completely upside down, you're going to target the bottom half of the photo instead of the top half. And so I'm going to flip it back around. Now, depending on how low you want to go, if you don't want the mountains affected at all, you're going to have to bring this bottom line up. And that way, the exposure correction is more intense at the top, and it fades out pretty quickly rather than a very graduated fade out effect, which trails a little bit into the mountains. But I'm okay with that, so I'm going to leave it as is. Now say for example, not only did we want to decrease the exposure value of the sky, but we also wanted to increase the saturation of the blue tones. So what we can do here is the saturation slider, move that over to the right, and you'll get a much more saturated blue tone to the sky. And you can see that the effect is quite natural. Another important point to mention here is that we can have multiple graduated filters. So say for example, here we've made adjustments to the sky, but we also want to make adjustments to the water here. So you can draw another graduated filter. Okay, now you'll see that the horizontal lines are now attached to this filter, but this one is still available for adjustment. If you wanted to switch to it, you can go ahead and just click it. If you click this point here, now we're working with the bottom graduated filter. In this case, I will increase the exposure value for the lake, make it a little bit brighter. So there's a deep contrast between the sky and the lake below it. And we'll also go ahead and decrease the clarity. And what that does is it creates more of a slow shutter speed effect if you're into photography. If you take a shot on a tripod with a very slow shutter, you get a softer kind of blur effect. So this is increasing clarity, this is decreasing it. Okay, now similar to the other tools we've worked with, these pins over here, this top one and the bottom one, if you don't want to see them, in the Show Edit Pins menu, you can adjust it. So if you don't want to see any of them ever, just place a check mark next to never. But it's typically a good idea to leave it on auto. And that way you can see the one that you're currently working on. Now if you want to duplicate or delete a gradient, right click on the pin and there's your options to duplicate or delete. I'll go ahead and remove the bottom one and you can see that the top one is still there for us to work on. If you hover your mouse over the pin, you can see a faint red mask, and this mask tells us exactly what areas of this photo the graduated filter has been applied to. So you can see exactly where your transition ends and begins. Okay, and that's how you work with the graduated filter tool. If you want to apply the settings, as with the other tools we've worked with, make sure you press done, and that will apply the adjustment you just made. So we'll see you in the next lecture.